Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm here to talk about the ISTJ polar function, point of least resistance function, not the polar bear. That is the seventh function on our stack, and if you're wondering, well, Paul, how can I figure out what my polar function is? Just take your tertiary function, which is your third one, and flip the introversion or extroversion. So if your tertiary function is extroverted thinking, it becomes introverted thinking. So in other words, if the tertiary function is the good enough function that needs developing, the polar function is the what the heck is this? This is driving me crazy function. It's actually the least used out of everything. However, I am not going to keep using this track because I realized that I'm one of the only, if not the only, ISTJs talking about this. And since my way that I like to learn things is through facts and documentation, that's not how you guys are thinking, unless you happen to be an ISFJ watching this. But I've only seen like one or two in the entirety of my channel's history, so I'm not going to rely on that happening. I'm going to try my best to do things in a way that's more familiar to you guys, so aka talking about life experiences, and how the lack of extroverted feeling is actually a huge contributing factor in a lot of decisions that I might make that make other people go, huh? So for starters, there's only one other type that shares the polar function with the ISTJ, and that's the INTJ. So a lot of common complaints that people will throw at our two types are just off the top of my head. You guys are very robotic and unemotionless. Unemotionless. ISTJ is making spelling errors? Please. Unemotional. We don't necessarily show our emotions all that much, and we don't generally have an awareness of the outside world's feelings. So let me give you an example of that before I go in depth about like, oh, you guys are wrong. That's totally not how we are, because we are like that. We just don't always want to admit it. First off, one example that I noticed in recent memory was I was watching a YouTube video, and I won't share the link to it because honestly, I feel like the more people that watch the video, the more it's creating the problem that I'm about to describe. But I was watching a YouTube video about a girl who was taller than the average girl, and basically like talking about what that's like and how that's going to make her famous because so many people know that she's so tall. And I'm watching this thinking like, okay, I mean, I think that's kind of unfortunate that this girl is being used for fame, but I mean, that's pretty cool that she's so tall. I mean, that probably has a whole lot of advantages. And I'm sure that'd be cool to meet someone like that someday. Then juxtaposing it with my own height, trying to figure out like where my head would be in proximity to her body. The usual introverted sensing stuff. Then I read the comments section, and the most common comment thread I read was, "Oh my gosh, that poor girl. She sounds like she's gonna cry the whole video." I'm like, she what? She was feeling sad? Oh, shoot, how could I have possibly missed that? And I know my best friend talks about that all the time, too, where, like, everyone else is crying about something, and he'll just be like, I don't see what the fuss is about. That's not to say ISTJs don't detect that. It's more so of they might not necessarily know how to feel because they have extroverted feeling as their least used function. So, for example, my sister and I went to go see Endgame. And I'm not going to spoil anything for those that haven't seen the last Marvel Avengers movie. But suffice to say, there was a sad scene in there. And I thought, like, oh, yeah, that must be pretty depressing to a lot of people. But it turns out my sister was crying in her seat in the theater. And I thought, oh, well, she's probably hunched over like that because she's tired and she's probably taking a nap. After we left the theater, she said, Paul, weren't you also so upset at this certain scene? I was like, well, not really. Oh, was I supposed to comfort you? I'm sorry. So that lack of awareness of exactly what was my sister feeling and what were her emotional needs in the moment completely flew over my head. And to a lot of ISTJs, they won't even apologize and say, well, what can I do to make up for it? A lot of them, because they're unaware of this weakness of theirs, they're not going to put in an effort to improve. Whereas I I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I've studied Myers-Briggs and said, oh, these are weaknesses of ISTJs. If I want to be the most efficient in the world, I should probably work on these skills. A lot of ISTJs will just be like, oh, just stop crying. It's not worth it. It's just a movie. I mean, in movies, stuff happens. It's not real. That's just not going to work on people that have that in their function stack. And we need to figure that out. How? I don't know. I'm just here to tell you about it. It also means that we're going to have a heavy emphasis on rejecting traditions that we haven't seen ourselves as being viable. Now, people like the ESTJs and the ESFJs will defend traditions for their own sake. We will say, why does that exist? So, another example to give is when I was invited to a wedding. Now, granted, the girl that I'm using as the example here was an INFP, but the fact still stands that she had more extroverted feeling than I did, because an INFP's extroverted feeling is number 5 instead of being number 7. So, and she was marrying an ENFJ, so I presume she was probably thinking in his best interest, because it was her best interest to have his best interest. Whatever. I'm not going to try to explain it. Anyway, one of them was feeling extrovertedly feeling, and she apparently was the spokesperson, because she was like, Paul, we would be so honored if you would grace us with your presence in the church. To which I was like, okay, well, how about you take a cheap camera or your phone or whatever is available and take a video of the wedding ceremony. Then I can watch you guys. They're like, no, Paul, we want you to be there. I was like, be there? Why? And I kept trying to ask them like practical reasons for why my physical presence in that church would be beneficial to them. That didn't even seem to cross their minds that beneficial and logical would even be something to consider at a wedding. They were just like, Paul, you're our friend, and we invite friends to weddings. It's like, but why does it matter if I'm physically there? Is it because of my deodorant? Is it because of what I'm wearing? Is it because of the pheromones that I'm emitting from my body? Overall, they didn't know how to explain it to me in a way that made sense. Eventually, I decided to go because I thought that one of my best friends was going to be able to go. Turns out, after I said I would go, she messaged me back and was like, oh, I don't even know your friend, but she can still come. So I said, hey, you still want to come? Sorry, Paul, but I can't. So I was like, well, I hate breaking my promise, so I guess I'll go, even though I hate it. So I ended up closing my eyes the whole time. Did I look like an idiot in front of everyone? Probably. But I didn't care. To me, it didn't seem necessary to try to put on a brave face when I wasn't feeling brave at all. I was not wanting to be there, and I wanted more than anything to just run out of the room. And eventually I did. Not during the ceremony, of course. But the reason why I stuck around was because of this inner moral system, there's the tertiary introverted feeling coming about, that says, do to others as you would have them do to you. So, I thought about, well, I wouldn't like it if my friends turned down my own wedding invitation. But then I got stuck in a loop of thinking only of how I feel about things as opposed to thinking about how the average person feels about things. Because extroverted feelers are all about like the most common denominator of emotions. ISTJs usually come across as maybe they have a smidgen of extroverted feeling if it's on familiar territory. So for example, if an ISTJ has worked in funerals all their lives, of course they're going to be considerate and compassionate and know exactly what to say to console someone who's experienced the loss of a loved one. If you haven't, the ISTJ is not going to have a clue what to do. So, in the same respect, when I think about the possibility of getting married, I think about the fewest number of people I want to invite, as opposed to, well, we got to cut corners because we have so many people to invite. To an ISTJ, less is more. Selective is power. But to someone with extroverted feeling, they're more like, oh, that person's going to get offended if we don't invite them, we'd better invite them because somehow we can read their mind. We can tell that they're going to be offended, as opposed to just texting them and saying, would it bother you if we didn't invite you to the wedding because, wedding costs? To most feeling types, that would be scandalous. How dare we put that out there to people? How dare we say exactly what we mean? To a certain extent, that's a problem we ISTJs run into because we don't factor that in. We end up saying things as they are. And that ends up getting us into a heck of a lot of trouble because people say that's so rude or that's so inconsiderate. Why didn't it cross your mind that maybe that was a racist comment? Why didn't it cross your mind that maybe that was a sexually impure? And it's like, what? I wasn't trying to be racist or sexually impure. I was just talking. To an ISTJ, it seems weird that you should put a filter on the truth. I guess it's kind of like if you try to stop a hose from spraying water with one finger. It's like the water's just going to burst out of the ends of your fingertips anyway, or the hose is going to explode because you're not allowing the pressure to go forward. To an ISTJ, to have to suppress the truth would be kind of like telling an INFP, oh, just hold in your tears when they're about to cry. It's like, no, when they come, they flood. So another example of this was when we were talking about Thanksgiving. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to join in the festivities. And my parents were saying things like, well, if you didn't show up for the festivities, then people are going to think things. And I'm like, do I really care what people think? But in the long run, after the Bible said, honor your father and mother, I was like, well, okay, I'll do it. I'm not happy. I'm not particularly fond of being at this dinner party thing, but okay, I guess. The thing is, ISTJs also are not gonna show a lot of their outward emotions because that's another form of extroverted feeling, is in a sense emotional vomiting, and introverted feelers do this to a certain degree. I've seen ENFPs and ESFPs that get very emotionally expressive. ISTJs just aren't necessarily going to match what's on their face or their body movements with what's being said. For instance, let's say that I'm talking about the conference that I'm about to chaperone. And I'm like filled with excitement for this upcoming conference. And I am just so excited that it's about the equivalent of someone asking to asking if we can get married. Would a woman ask out the man nowadays? In this progressive society, I'm not surprised of anything anymore, pretty much. It felt like a wedding proposal when I got the paper that said, you are going to be able to chaperone this conference. I was like, oh boy. But what did I do in front of everyone? Yeah, that's right. I just stood there and I looked at it. And around a couple of choice people that I trusted, I would wave the form back and forth and I'd say, hey, guess what? I get to chaperone the conference again. This is my 12th one. See, I'm immediately reverting back to that introverted feeling, introverted sensing combo. Now, if I were a little bit more mature, I'd probably say something along the lines of, I am honored at the proposition of being able to train so many adolescent minds. What did I say instead? It's gonna be great to have teenagers saying what they said to me 2 years ago. Or that I'm gonna see the carpet in all of its glory. The food court is back. Of course, I'm not saying all of this out loud, but this is like what's going through my head. There's a lot of familiar elements that I'm going to be able to re-experience that I liked before. And I'm not going to be thinking about, ooh, I wonder how the conference is going to be improved. Instead, I'm thinking, ooh, the conference was great last year. I'm looking forward to them doing that again. So, in other words, if ISTJs do show excitement, they tend to do it in a way that most people find boring because they can't fathom dominant introverted sensing and the way that they process excitement. To an ISTJ, we have a very compartmentalized brain that is very difficult for the average person to understand. That we take basically everything that's enjoyable and we put them in their own compartments. And each compartment gives us permission to use whichever emotion we deem is proper for the moment. So, for example, if we do not feel that it is proper to, I don't know, let's say we were going to a Buddhist temple, and there's a certain thing that the Buddhists expect you to do during the service. The ISTJ just wouldn't do it. People would be like, "You're supposed to be kneeling at this point." I'd be like, "I'm not worshiping the same God as you guys are. So therefore, I'm not going to kneel to a false God." And whereas most people with extroverted feeling wouldn't have that kind of courage to resist the temptation, they would just do it saying like, "Well, I don't believe in this God either, but I just want to keep the peace." See, ISTJ is like emotional honesty. So whereas everyone else will say, "Oh, okay, I'll succumb to it for your sake," ISTJs will say, "Why? What's the point?" Now, at first glance, that makes us seem incredibly selfish. That we're the type that only ever thinks about ourselves and everyone else can go die a horrible death. It's just that ISTJs prefer to have a more thorough, precise, focused approach to everyone else's needs, as opposed to this more, "Oh, my vibe sensor is detecting that this person is upset." The ISTJ is more going to think, okay, based on how life works and how God designed the human body, what is most likely to make people uncomfortable, and what can we do to fix it? So in other words, ISTJs are going to try to find the problem before they find the person. People with extroverted feeling are going to try and find the person before they find the problem. So in other words, the extroverted feeler is going to say, okay, I'm detecting that you are upset, and I'm detecting that you all are upset, so let's do something about it. The ISTJ is going to say, it seems that there is something that's making these people upset. I bet if I eliminate the problem, then I can make all the people feel better. So instead of the extroverted feeler saying, "Come here, let me comfort you," the ISTJ is going to say, "Let me come to the rescue. Let me defeat the dragon." So I guess you could compare us to a sword and a shield. Yes, Pokemon just came out. I'll give my thoughts if you guys really want me to, but honestly, I don't really care about Pokemon. The ISTJ is going to be the Pokemon sword, the one that's going to say, "I will defend you, I will jump to the rescue, I will slice depression in half." Because thinking overrides feeling, we're not going to think about, "Oh, is this uncomfortable?" We're going to say, "It's our civil duty to protect the townspeople." The extroverted feeler is going to be more of the shield that says, "I will stand in the way of everyone, and I will make sure that if the problem tries to mess with people, you have to go through me first." And they can occasionally reverse roles. It's just that they're going to have that dominant mindset. But because the ISTJ doesn't have extroverted feeling at all, it's more so of going in with a double-edged sword instead of having both a sword and a shield. So in other words, the ISTJ might be so focused on solving the problem that the person might complain, "But Paul, I would just like you to listen." "Oh, but what if I solve the problem? Then wouldn't that make you not need to talk to me? Because if the problem was eradicated, then you'd feel better." "But Paul, part of the problem is that I don't have anyone to listen to me." Wait, so your problem is your lack of people to listen? You're telling me that people don't use their ears? In other words, the ISTJ would have to talk through why it is that they can't be the hero and why it would be more practical to step back. In other words, to say extroverted feeling or extroverted thinking, "Shut up. Right now, this person needs you to do something that is unfamiliar to you. You are in uncharted waters now." And that's why the ISTJ struggles in these kinds of emotional struggles, or in these emotionally charged moments. They're not scripted. They're not something that they can predict, unless they're a doctor or a psychologist or something like that. I don't know. We are gonna think, "Oh no, I have never encountered someone that has lost their mother before. What should I do? The extroverted feeler is going to have a general sense of what the person needs in the moment. The ISTJ is going to say, maybe I should consult an expert here. So, in other words, unfortunately to us, we have to have people reminding us of when we need to learn how to improvise, to learn how to take a leap of faith and be willing to get uncomfortable because other people are uncomfortable from something that we don't understand. It's a long process. And maybe that's why they say that the ESTP is the best match for the ISTJ, because they have tertiary extroverted feeling. So even if it's not like a priority like it is for, say, the ESFP or the ENFJ, the ESFP is going to still have some grasp of like, dude, if you go in there with that t-shirt, you're going to look so unpopular. Here, let me get you a better t-shirt. So in that respect, the ESTP could probably phrase it in a way that doesn't seem too sugarcoaty. Because if, say, we were dating an ESFP, they might say like, oh, I really don't like what you did to your hair. That's just awful. The ISTJ is going to say, I don't care. The ESTP is more going to say like, dude, you want to maximize the amount of enjoyment you have at this party? Do you want to sit alone in a corner in style? Not that an ESTP would ever want someone to sit alone, but of all the types that would do that, an ESTP would. I'm on a tangent. So, bottom line, if you haven't gotten anything else out of this info dumping video, it's if you really want an ISTJ to try really, really, really hard to develop their extroverted feeling, if they can ever get to that point, here's a couple of factors, and I'm going to try to keep this brief because I don't want this video to go over 25 minutes. The first step is explain to them in a logical, step-by-step, precise manner what emotions are and what generally to expect from them. This may be an impossible task, but try to the best of your ability to relate it to something tangible, like maybe saying emotions are like cereal. And then make sure that the analogy is so watertight that the ISTJ is like, that totally makes sense. As opposed to, wait, but if you compare it to cereal, then does that mean that after we eat the emotions, then they go out into the toilet? And you're like, no, you're thinking too deep into it. Again, it's a challenge, but it's the best way I can think of. The second reason, or the second method of trying to get an ISTJ to recognize extroverted feeling is to try to remember moments that are important to the ISTJ and then use those memories as your tools. So if an ISTJ tells you about the greatest day of their life, remember it. Write it in a book, record them saying it with your phone, whatever it takes, remember that. And then use that as an argument for pretty much everything. If the ISTJ is being insensitive, say, remember the best day of your life. If the ISTJ is like, I'm sorry, but I don't get what you're trying to say, you'll say, well, let me relate it to the best day of your life. That's the start, coming from an ISTJ myself, who has mostly intuitive friends who do not know how to explain things to me. And the third reason, and then I'm going to get out of here because I don't want this video to go over 25 minutes, and that's basically don't try to tell the ISTJ to stifle the truth. Instead, teach them how to tell the truth in a way that won't hurt. In other words, instead of asking them to fabricate the truth, ask them to omit certain elements of the truth. Like say, okay, if you meet a beautiful girl, you do not have to comment on her upper body. That would be improper. However, the one part of her upper body that you can compliment her on is her face. You can tell her she has a good face, but do not comment on anything else. Why, Paul? They have a double X chromosome. You do not want to go there. Double X chromosome? I don't know what that's like, but okay, whatever. Again, it's a start. If I knew the solution, I wouldn't be making this video. But that's a start. It's helped me a lot, and I hope it helps other people, especially if you have an ISTJ that you love. With that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you can think of anything at all that I might have missed. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.